Okay, so we will begin now. Hello again on 10th of June 2026. My name is Bally Binning. Today's session, Leaderize bi-weekly session. As most of you know, these sessions run every other Wednesday. Absolute pleasure having you. We've got some familiar faces and we also have a couple of new faces here. So welcome, welcome. For those who are joining and it's your first time, the way these sessions work, it's an 1 hour session, and there's quite a lot of content that I'll go through today. And I'm actually going to start with a clip, which is unusual because I start with slides. And as always, feel free to raise your hand or pop a question in the chat. And yeah, Ivan, great seeing you also. Really good to see you. So, this is actually a few things that have come about, and I'll say for some of you know that I was helping Jarrett Robbins last week with his event, which is Executive Office AI, where he helped business owners execute and have their agents activated, right? So they have their agents working now. There's a few layers involved, and some of the questions that came up from that session really prompted me to think, okay, how can I add more to us here? Because there's going to be questions that will come up for you for sure. Maybe they're questions that you've been thinking about, or perhaps you haven't asked, and we'll kind of address some of those. So I'm going to start with a little clip, which, like I said, it's unusual. I'm using NotebookLM. I also like to use some of these tools and happy to kind of show that to us as.
Look at any modern enterprise, and you
I'll
will
make
see a
sure.
massive volume of corporate data moving at impossible speeds, flowing invisibly through daily automated operations. Until recently, interacting with AI within these networks meant using a stateless chatbot model. You asked a question, you received an answer, and the context reset completely. It was a single, isolated exchange. Now we are moving to stateful AI agents. An agent has a persistent role. It retains memory, accesses automated tools, and works continuously toward a specific goal without requiring a new prompt for every step. This is the core operational shift occurring across the enterprise right now, a rapid transition from relying on stateless chatbots to deploying stateful autonomous agents. But this shift has created a dangerous professional misconception. Many enterprise leaders assume that simply paying for an enterprise license from a large language model provider guarantees total data security. That assumption fails because agents move past simple text generation to actively access and make decisions based on live company databases. If you rely solely on the terms of service of the model itself, you leave entirely different layers of your infrastructure unprotected from exposure. Securing these systems requires mapping the agent's architecture to protect three specific layers of exposure that sit outside the model's standard security perimeter. To locate where these vulnerabilities exist, we have to deconstruct the architecture of the agent itself. An agent has 5 interconnected components: a model, a defined role, internal knowledge, an output format, and workflow triggers. When operating autonomously without human oversight, the system becomes structurally vulnerable, triggering 4 failure modes: hallucination, sycophancy, drift, and goal misalignment. Goal misalignment is particularly dangerous. Agents execute instructions literally. If you tell an agent to maximize engagement, it will optimize strictly for that metric, even if it requires taking unintended actions to achieve it. To fix this, builders must add a critical 6th component to surround the system: trust and verification. This mandates a strict rule. A human must remain in the loop for any financial decisions, critical legal documents, or client communications. Without this mandatory verification layer in place, an enterprise is entirely blind to the unsupervised decisions its AI is making with its data. Understanding how the agent is built is only the first step. We also have to trace the physical journey of your data as it moves across networks. The first point of exposure is layer 1, the direct user input fed into the large language model. If you are using a personal account tier, your inputs may be used to train future versions of the model. Upgrading to an enterprise tier implements stronger protections, restricting data retention and opting your inputs out of the training pool. This three-tier diagram illustrates the blind spot. Layer 2, the orchestration layer. This third-party intermediary hosts your agents and internal knowledge, exposing your data to unknown server jurisdictions. This leads to the most critical risk, Layer 3, regulated client data. Feeding unredacted personally identifiable information, health records, or financial data into any AI orchestration system without explicit consent constitutes a severe compliance violation. Global regulations, including the EU AI Act, are rapidly tightening their requirements around high-risk use cases in the legal, financial, and healthcare sectors. Locking down your LLM account at Layer 1 is useless if the orchestration layer and your raw client data remain exposed on external servers. Fortunately, enterprise infrastructure has caught up. You no longer have to compromise between the capabilities of a frontier model and strict data control. The direct solution for securing Layer 2 is the deployment of self-hosted sandboxes. Sandboxes allow your agents to execute tools strictly within your enterprise's own virtual private cloud, completely isolating the compute environment from third-party hosting. To securely connect internal databases to external models, we use MCP tunnels, routing data through encrypted pathways that bypass the public internet. This keeps your proprietary APIs behind the firewall while permitting the external LLM to interact with the data. That secures the infrastructure, but we still have to solve the hardest operational problem, processing raw, regulated client data without ever exposing it to the model. This animated sequence demonstrates the solution, data tokenization. Before leaving your network, real names and numbers are replaced with abstract placeholders. The LLM processes only those placeholders to complete its logic, and your local system restores the actual information when the output returns. Because the model only ever ingests these tokens, the real client data legally never leaves your enterprise boundary. By utilizing sandboxes, MCP tunnels, and tokenization, you eliminate the core risk of exposing regulated data to third-party models. Claiming ignorance of where data flows is no longer a legally or operationally defensible position for any enterprise leader. This matrix maps out the immediate actions required to lock down all three layers of your AI exposure. If you are using personal accounts for business workflows, you must immediately upgrade to enterprise tiers to secure your inputs at Layer 1. If your team relies on third-party orchestration platforms, you need to audit their hosting locations and memory retention policies to secure Layer 2. And if you handle regulated client data, you must implement tokenization or MCP tunnels before you execute your next query. Implementing this architecture transforms a technical security requirement into a strategic, market-facing asset. Being the professional who can truthfully guarantee to clients that external AI never ingests their raw data gives you a highly differentiated and defensible market position. Your infrastructure operates as a completely sealed system, processing advanced intelligence internally while remaining fully isolated from outside exposure. Mastering agentic data architecture establishes the technical environment necessary to scale autonomous AI operations.
Okay, so a lot of
Wow.
a lot of information there. I'm going to start with there's a lot that's probably kind of going on for you as you're listening to that. And yeah, so and I know, Richard, you were obviously in last week at the tech event, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was a lot of the talk about, containerized or scaffolded small private large language models, which is certainly where um, the industries that were mentioned need to migrate to. Anyone dealing with PI, HIPAA, or client-related data, because the problem we're seeing is the extensive amount of hallucinations, especially in legal, reaching the courtroom, because you mentioned the whole human in the loop factor. That's just being bypassed when you use public Gen AI products to do legal research, and worse, introduce that into court. I think the one listen, fantastic presentation, and definitely where most industries need to move. But I think what still concerns me is this whole notion of human in the loop. What kind of tools and validation and what representation of that can we put in front of people using these products to ensure that they have enough information, reliability, and clarification on whether the information is indeed um, palatable and meets the metal or the test of validity to be used in whatever client related fashion that is. You know, human in the loop is a great concept that we all talk about and have the necessity for. But how do we as humans ensure that what the AI has produced is fully verifiable? What's the representation of that? We're talking dashboard reportings that have, analytical tools that are not large language model related, that are database queries, which we know don't have the same kind of bias or hallucination kind of coefficient to it. So I think that's the piece that I think really needs to be nailed down, because again, this is a sophisticated presentation, and for most people in business, it's way over their heads. So you've got to build the tools that kind of cover those concerns and make it in a visually appealing and simplistic manner so that they don't have to worry about, the plumbing and what goes on behind the scenes, which this presentation is pretty amazing and pretty well built. And I've had the pleasure of conversations with Jarek, and this is definitely the right way to go
Yeah,
in this direction for these industries. Sorry
absolutely.
about that long-winded response.
Oh no, absolutely. And some of this I've actually synthesized from research as well. And I'll say what was covered in the. I'll go through some slides in a moment. And
Hmm.
what essentially is about having those experts still. I say we say human in the loop, but I we actually mean those specific experts that know their craft, that can actually verify and actually sign off,
Yeah,
because that's going to be needed. It's We're going to have those individuals, they're going to be needed. Absolutely. It's key that those individuals take that responsibility and not
yeah,
and not kind of say, well, it was the output of the AI. And I am going to be sharing something that was made available. It's free, a way of tokenizing your work. And I'll share that in a few moments. There's a little clip that goes with that before I kind of give you that in a few moments as we go through today's session. I hope that's got you thinking about some of the things that are coming up and what we're having to think about with and I'll mention as we go through the slides when we're thinking about our own data, and all of us have been using AI tools and perhaps have had that conversation. Where does it sit? Does it sit on it sits in the cloud? Okay, where it's in the cloud. Okay, so how can I have more kind of, how can I hold on to this so that it's not kind of revealing confidential information? And this is where we can use this one tool, which I'll share. It's called 123chat.ai. It's free. It was introduced to me by a colleague last week, and I'll give you the link and I'll say how this works. And also, then what we might do is use Claude Code and keep our file on our desktop. So we use the
yeah,
disk as opposed to using Cowork. So for those individuals perhaps thinking of using Claude, thinking I'm using the chat or Cowork, it feels easier to use. That information will remain in the cloud. Whereas if we're using if we're using Claude Code, we can actually keep that material on our desktop. And that's always the avenue to go. And that's where some of the friction comes about, because people often ask the
mm,
question, well, I don't really haven't used that, so I use Cowork, but that information then will sit in the cloud. So I just wanted to flag that up as I start the conversation as we move on today. Okay, so like I said, please raise your hands, and that's hence the reason I think those other midpoints as we move forward be helpful.
right.
Um, okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'll give you some of these.
Um,
Yes, did you want to say
right,
something, Richard?
yeah, just right now, Cowork is still running in a Linux container on your desktop. But you're right. Anthropic will be eventually combining chat, Cowork, design, all of that will be, and even code, all of that will be under one roof, but code will still be the only true version that resides on your desktop. Um, the other three components, they'll all be merged together so it can share comparable memory and sustainable and persistent memory and all those pieces. We're not there yet, but that's where Anthropic is headed,
Yeah,
to your point.
absolutely. Yeah. And there are going to be questions around how do I use Claude Code if I'm using Cowork? So those might be
Right,
some of the questions that might come up for
right.
people.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and eventually will Claude Code be a more intuitive interface. Right now, it's a terminal app, just like Cursor and many of the others, which is a little bit scary for lay people like us to get over initially, the shock of dealing in that kind of user interface. But that's okay. We'll get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage everyone to have attempt to use it. And that's why I think those questions have to be had, or often people say, I don't feel comfortable using this particular tool because, I don't know. Like, is it safe? Like, what does that mean? And they people are confusing claw with code, and there's also lots of different sort of things floating around where it gets confusing, right? So I'm going to go through a few examples of what came about last week and how so the slides I showed you was kind of a synthesized part of some research from kind of my own research, if you like, and what I saw. A snippet of the MCP component really came through that the conversation about where data lives. So last week's event was a 2-day event, and so for those who perhaps didn't hear about it, it was looking at how businesses are using AI and how you know agents are being deployed, if you like. And we saw plethora of different agents from 90 plus agents, starting from a chief of staff. And I know you've mentioned chief of staff, in fact, might have been Tom, CEO, leadership, CFO, sales, marketing, and scriptwriter. There's so many that Jarek had. And so these are some of the examples. So I wanted to show you these because it's often these conversations, well, are people seeing these results? And last week we clearly saw those examples. So we had one example where food cost dashboard. In fact, what Richard was saying about sort of, how we have dashboards, a restaurant group tracking margins in real time. The agent flagged anomalies before the management meeting. So the owners stopped discovering problems at month end. So we could see real-time data as perhaps there's fluctuations in prices, and so hugely detailed. So, prices may range and might move. And so that was a really good example. A 15-minute pitch deck, a private aviation company needed a custom proposal. The agent built presentation ready documenting under 15 minutes. The same task previously took hours, even days, if you like. Chief of staff agent, coordinating layer that ran the daily briefing, flagged what needed attention and routed tasks to the right specialist agent. A senior leader's morning started with intelligence, not inbox chaos. I really like the idea, and I'm still exploring what Jarek's done, and I've created kind of a layer that how that sits with our own tool, whether it's Claude. I know we've spoken about Claude more, but it could be you may be using Anthropic's GPT. The interesting thing is, I really like this handover agent, and I'm not sure if I've seen the handover agent. Maybe that's the piece I've missed, but I've actually created a handover myself in and we can all do something like that, right? So hands over before, and there's a way it tests to see if they feel that's to the standards, like you could have standards and it goes through a criteria check before it hands over to the next person, right? So there's ways of doing this, and
Mm.
AI makes that. absolutely incredible. So software as a service, AI software used to deliver something thousand times more efficiently than doing it manually. The product is the software, the product is the output the software makes possible. So as we go through this, and we saw examples of this, and I won't go into too much because we saw it in the example of where we see hallucination. So once we have these AI tools or agents, just to check those fixes that, how do we verify? We've spoken about this when we've spoken about how we triangulate, how we research to ensure that, is that information perhaps it's company based. Is it based on that information within the company? But if it then goes and does some market analysis or competitive analysis, then we also have to check that that information has been
Yeah.
triangulated and checked, right? It's really key that we still apply our expertise and as individuals who've been through this training and making sure that we're checking factual information and not taking just the kind of first output that has it gone and checked. Is it, it will give you sometimes AIs may give you the wrong timing of things. I always say, to this date in time. So just to kind of remind it, what date it is, because it doesn't always get that if you've noticed, right? And we've seen, sycophancy, where it kind of agrees with you. And there are prompts we can get it to put, to ask it to, not to give you this the response. You just want it to push back, right? So there's certain prompts that I've created. I'm happy to share those where, I had what a contrarian GPT. I don't know if you remember the contrarian GPT was the one that would go in and pick all the faults, because it was like the person that, looks at everything critically and will ask those questions. I think somebody just put something in the chat. LLMs are not
Yeah.
to provide that layer of validation, asking them to validate their own output is not reliable, even for RAG, where you say at least you can get citations on all, where you can get citations on all sources. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's a great
Because
point.
you're talking about research, which obviously, products like Manus and Perplexity, which is a RAG. Um, if you're so dependent, obviously, on the citations and the accuracy of it, but yeah, you can't ask a large language model to check itself. I mean, you can have it step through a checklist and very specific line of criteria to check its work. But again, it's the fox watching the hen house. It's not always going to be working,
No,
which is why
yeah.
what you've introduced is so key.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? You can get it to check its work and it kind of agrees and it goes backwards and forwards. It's a bit like, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. And then it's like, yeah. So having those criteria settings is key, right? So, and you set these benchmarks that you then decide. And as an organization, you have these benchmarks embedded in these layers that, that kind of becomes the way it checks and validates. It may drift. You might find that it kind of goes off, and there's definitely less steering. The earlier models, the threes, and we saw that where there was much more steering needed. We're not finding that as much now, but still it could drift, and we just want to make sure that there's a way to fix that. And goal misalignment, right? Did it get the actual goal? So non-negotiables, we've spoken about this, having a human in the loop. Human review is not friction, it's the control layer. And again, it's becoming even more critical, certainly as we step into the EU Act, which comes into force at the beginning, well, in 1st of August, actually, so only a few weeks away. And we're going to see much more coming about in the next few
Oh yeah.
a lot more cases. We're already seeing that, right, in the media, which is, well, yeah. So you will see it from your end.
Well, the
Yeah.
EU is stopping you to use Office 365 and Google because of that landmark instance in Amsterdam where Microsoft was compelled by, I think, DOJ to provide information from from the Amsterdam government on data that was collected, and just again another overstepping of Microsoft was compelled to do it, or they faced sanctions or whatever in the U.S. for that. But that I think that was the nail in the coffin, and I know you're going to speak more on that in a bit. But it was surprising, but again, America's moving towards an isolation standpoint uh, based on our actions. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue this conversation. I feel the week after next, we'll kind of expand on this a little bit more with what we can do then as business owners and what's possible, right? Where data exposure actually happens, three layers. We've seen this, so we say, so where. For what can we do? So personal, so if we go into our Claude AI or ChatGPT accounts and we know that the models are trained and we can actually toggle to make sure that we can toggle whether they still do, but we can do what we can on our end to ensure that they're not being trained on our data.
Yeah,
Um, and does that mean it's being trained on other data? Yes, yeah, that still continues. And check your plan, check your settings. If you handle anything, if you handle sensitive information, then ensure that it's been toggled, or you may, for those in enterprises, that might be the tier that you need to go on to make sure that you've got that in place, right? So, so agent platform agents, if you're using done for you agents, your data lives wherever that platform hosts it. So just to be mindful of where that information is, the orchestration memory knowledge base may live on the platform provider's infrastructure, right? Ask before connecting, where is the data stored? I think this is the big question that kind of perhaps people aren't asking. And what is the retention policies, the platform? Is it compliant? And those are the questions that we can start asking. When you type a client's name, financial info, health records, etc., even on a business tier, you're making a decision about their data, right? Without their knowledge, without their consent. For those in sort of regulated sort of sectors, like most of us are, it's becomes a compliance issue. So as we saw in that clip, it's no longer. I didn't realize the data was going there. It's not a defensible position. It's serious stuff, right? I'm laughing at it, but it's just ludicrous that people even still think that they can get away with it. So what's new this week? So if you've been following kind of what's been happening, if you haven't already, well, this new model, Claude's model, was released on the 9th of June, which is Fable 5, Anthropic's latest
yeah,
model, now available. And if you haven't seen it, for those who haven't seen it, it will pop up is the latest model. And it only popped up today for me. I don't know, perhaps it was there earlier your
yeah,
end. Yeah, was it there yesterday already? Yeah.
yeah. It popped up for me yesterday, and I think there was a link because obviously Fable has some of the aspects of the not Hermes. Sorry, I'm confusing it. The Greek name for the product that Anthropic came out with that they allowed to be used by 40 firms to
Oh, Mythos.
Mythos. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Claude Fable has Mythos, but the way I understand it, you'll probably get into this, is yeah, some of the Mythos aspects were so alarming that Anthropic choked it back. But I believe what they're doing is if within the Claude Fable construct, if a prompt lends itself to something where the Mythos engine, I guess, goes beyond a safety realm or whatnot, the model will then defer back to Opus 4.8. So
Y-
that's my understanding.
Yes, yeah. And there was a few conversations. I also saw people worried about kind of more token usage, or is that does that
Yeah,
mean
it's
that's
at
not
least double. It's at least double Opus 4.eight's token use. Yeah.
it sounds like it is, but I don't think that's kind of what this that is from my understanding, that's not the case. So we might need to
Uh,
review that. It sounded like it was going to be using more, and we're seeing more usage available on the pro and the paid version. If you've seen that we get sort of more token usage, but I don't think that's the case with Fable. And only time will tell because it's obviously just been released, and we'll
yeah.
get to test this out. And yes, you're right. By default, it will default to Opus 4.8, and 4.8 already scans for that security component because I actually went to one of the Anthropic seminars on compliance, and some of this has been informed by their training that I went on. So yeah, so enterprise can now bring their own infrastructure. So we obviously some of you will have seen that inside your own virtual cloud, right? It's a private cloud and not on Anthropic servers. So so these kind of things are coming up. The thing stopping agents from getting tasks done is infrastructure now, not the models. So we spoke about that before, and now we're actually seeing it happen. And what I saw in last week's case was like connecting MCP tunnels, like people were then in the live training last week were using the agents but connecting them through their own MCP tunnels, whether it's through Anthropic or through Claude or beg your pardon, Anthropic or OpenAI. And so
OpenAI.
yeah. So MCP tunnels, clear clause security. So I'm going to give you an example of this example, 123 chat.ai, practical answer for client data. And I'll show you how this works, and I'll show you a little clip. So the problem, and you may have seen something similar. Perhaps Tom, you've seen it with Peter Swains, or perhaps I know you are there. Perhaps there's some local. This is a local device. Basically, it's local LM if you like, and it's free, and I'll give you you just type in 123 chat dot AI, and I'll give you a little bit of information on this because the chap that put it together was one of the colleagues last week from Australia and works with lawyers also. So might be a good contact for yourself, Richard. I wanted to kind of flag his name up. In fact, I'll put you two in contact.
Okay.
So it's a little bit about the information here that the problem you need so you need the intelligence of a large language model, but you cannot expose your client's information to reach it. So the example is you have an import, we'll see an example of token output. So if you kind of think of tokens as a small piece, like tokens become if just different text formats. But so rather than exposing the information such as your account number, it will give you an output as a token. You know, it becomes yeah, no one sees that, right? So it kind of hides that, if you like, just in simple words. The LLM never sees your client's actual information because this is kind of what it does, right? It kind of puts it's in this bite-sized text format. So, which layer applies to you? Let me give you an example of what no, 123 chat 123.ai is so that you kind of get a feel for what that actually means. So I'm gonna hopefully it's behind this, and hopefully I can share my screen also. It should appear on here.
This is 123chat.ai, the AI chat built for people who handle sensitive information. If you're a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, or an advisor, you've probably been told, never paste client details into an AI tool. 123chat changes that. Here's what it does. You type normally, names, numbers, anything. But before a single word leaves your browser, the private details are replaced with placeholders. The AI only ever sees the tokens, never the real names or numbers. When the answer comes back, your real details are restored, right here on your screen. Here's how to use it. Just start typing or tap an example to begin. Want to try it for free? The starter pool lets you start instantly. Prefer unlimited use? Bring your own key. Connect your own Claude, GPT, or Gemini account, and your key stays in your browser, never on our servers. And when you need to share something sensitive, 123 Chat can encrypt an entire document, end to end, so only the person with your passphrase can open it. No sign up, and nothing is stored on our servers. Private AI, finally safe enough for real work. Try it now at 123chat.ai.
So yeah,
Ah,
it's great. Yeah, and I've been testing it also, and it's fairly
I will be too. Yeah.
yeah, give that a go. And when you
And
so
thank you for connecting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'll definitely connect you both, and he's got some
Well, actually,
incredible things
yeah.
happening. So that's yeah, I'll put you up both in contact. He's away at the moment, but I will definitely do that.
Actually, Jarek already did, Bally, but thank you for the intro to Jarek. That's how it happened.
You did he connect you with John?
Yeah. Yeah.
He
We're going
did.
to talk next week because this is really landmark stuff.
Okay, this is fantastic. He's got something else as well that would be worth of looking into. It's a legal AI component, and
Yes.
he did mention that. Okay, fantastic. He shared that with me. So yeah, have a look at sort of setting that up. When I say it's fairly simple to set up, you need to go to your Anthropic console when you put your IPI key in. And if you've got questions, I'm happy to jump on a call, help you set that up. It means, for example, Faruza, you're a coach. You can use that and then anonymize your clients' names. They never get exposed because they become tokenized. You know, it will just give you that kind of encrypted kind of code, if you like. It's a nice way of sharing, and also text. Like the idea of sharing text, so that it's straightforward and it's free, right? So it's a free tool to use. So feel free to kind of reach out to me. So let me double check what questions I've missed. Okay, so looks good. So fantastic. Yeah. Any questions before I continue? Because they're going to talk about settings. No, it's all good. Good.
I guess the only question I had was from earlier, and that is sorry, Tom, to jump in front of you, uh, but is where does RAG, augmented, where does that sit in on all this? I mean, that's still not immune to hallucinations, but it does provide, traceable citations for research and use. Is that recommended
That's
in any way? Or where does that where do RAG products like Perplexity fit in?
Yeah, that's a really good example because Ra Perplexity is RAG and other kind of models
Because
that
that was kind of like the interim stopgap for law firms. Don't use an LLM, use a RAG instead, because at least that gives you a more narrow focus on where the research is conducted and full citations. It can still hallucinate, but less likely and more likely that you can detect it because you can see if it's a made up citation.
yes, yeah, and you still want to check those citations. So just in
Yeah.
for anyone that's not sure, because Veruza, you may already be using the research AI, Perplexity AI. It's one for research. It's the, different AIs have different functions, LLMs like the large language models, which is Claude GPT or Gemini. Then you've got Perplexity AI. There are other as well now that are emerging, and that one has kind of the RAG, which sits, it's got a lot of database already there, which we can pull sources. You can also use the tool I used today to create that visual, which was the Notebook LM, right?
Yeah.
And so they've got their cinematic version, which you saw today. And so you can use that. And it's a great question about RAGs. I would say you would need to have the infrastructure in place, right? So whether we're using Vercel, whether we're using Cloudflare, we would need to have those in place, and to still to verify and check that it has and it's meeting, it's not picking anything up that shouldn't be, right? Is it
Mhm.
actually going into the library of sources, or is it kind of going into, that's why NotebookLM is one that a lot of people kind of go to. Or
Right. Because it's a container with scaffolding. It doesn't go outside of what you put in there. Yeah.
yeah, it tends to be one that's used. Tom, do you had a question?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt the flow. This is very interesting. I can see how useful this would be in terms of data security. I can imagine using, stepping into this myself. Um, can I ask a question on a different topic?
Sure.
Or should I put that for later? Okay. I know when you said you'd be covering some of the things that Jarek shared in the 2-day program, I was just wondering if you could devote 60 seconds to maybe, conceptually, not necessarily teaching me everything, but I'd like to create a chief of staff for myself regarding appointments and email and missed opportunities and things like that. And I don't know that I'm going to create that this week, but I would just love to hear your thoughts conceptually because I've never learned how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So the two things here. One is Jarek's got a platform that he's got these built into the platform that he's using, right? So he's got that platform built in where he's actually using these um, you know, agents, etc. I can show you. Let me see if I can show you what it looks like. And
Yeah. One of the keys that I've wrestled with this whole chief of staff concept, which I think is great, but obviously it's chewing up API calls as opposed to tokens that would be part of your OpenAI or Anthropic subscription. So I went through a kind of a gut-wrenching example where I attempted to convert some complicated Cowork skills into my chief of staff. It ended up costing me a ton of money. And I ended up coming to the conclusion that the skills that I've built in Cowork need to stay in Cowork, that the chief of staff is actually a, is actually the beauty of chief of staff is that it's portable because you can use Telegram or Slack as its user interface, but you use it more ad hoc, to process immediate requests like what are my top three things I need to do in this afternoon if you're out and about at a meeting or something. So that was one takeaway, Tom, that I learned some very painful lessons from the Peter Swain chief of staff.
I see.
And it was really on me because I kind of misunderstood that it's a replacement for Claude Cowork. It is not.
No.
It's a totally different animal. Although I don't know, within Jarek's enterprise construct, it may actually be able to do a lot of the stuff Cowork does on a more economical manner. But to try to do it yourself with an Hermes and or open claw kind of thing, yeah, I learned the hard way to make sure you understand the demarcation between what we've done in Cowork versus chief of staff. And of course, make sure that you're not using Opus 4.8 as the default LLM when you're building your chief of staff or you
Right.
chew up
Okay.
tokens like I did. So painful
Okay.
lessons. Sorry, Bally, I didn't mean
yeah,
to commandeer, but
Yeah, and Tom, you want to come in and I'll just say a little bit. In fact, what I'll do next time is go through using the different LLMs for different capabilities, like which ones for what, because that's
Okay.
something we've been covering, which I feel there's a real gap there. Tom, what you were going to add to this?
Yeah, no, I mean, appreciate, Richard, that you raised that point because I don't want to, it's kind of like falling down an open manhole because, like, I didn't realize this would cost me a fortune. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe there's a different way to do it that would give me the same end results. Like, okay, I'm glad glad I was aware that I don't have to do it the super expensive way. So I don't know, but
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
okay. I'm sure that's enough. I didn't mean to divert the conversation, but I was just curious because you said
no,
Go
it's
ahead, Richard.
very valuable. No, it's a very valuable question that you raised because yeah, chief of staff is the latest shiny object of many that come across our path, and totally autonomous agents, which Claude Cowork is not. Claude Cowork generally has intermediary steps that you, the user, have to sign off on. Like when I create my blog post or my email triage or any of my Cowork skills, if it has to access an external, like my Google email account or my Outlook account, there's usually a step in there where I have to approve it. Now you can approve it unilaterally so it doesn't ask you after the first time, or you can do it so that it's every time. It really depends on your tolerance. But you know, one thing I wanted to point out too is Anthropic has really good information about what, particularly the cowork, that you need to be mindful of in terms of risk, especially if you're using the Claude plugin to Chrome. Be very careful about, if you're using a Claude plugin to Chrome, make sure you don't have any credit card, banking, any kind of critical financial or personal data open in that browser while you're using it. Because I got hacked about 2 months ago. And
Yeah.
so just some cautionary tales there.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Just,
didn't mean to.
just to be really,
thank you.
mindful of that. I've heard also that if you having to grant it permissions on every step, it's then and we can check this ourselves. It's utilizing more tokens.
Yes.
However, if you allow it to then just, you know, sort of, doesn't need, and we just give it, enable that
Hmm.
in the first instance and say yes, enabled as you're working on this specific project, it tends not to. That's been my understanding of
Yeah.
it. And but we don't want to give
Yes.
that. We're still a little bit like holding on to kind of, wanting it to give that the permissions and just let it,
Right.
like do its thing, right? You're like, oh
It's
no, I'm just, so there's still a little bit of that we're wanting to be careful of. These are cautionary
Okay.
tales and tales. Okay, so
Okay,
yeah,
thank you. Oh,
just
appreciate
to
it.
kind
Thank
of
you.
recap on a few things. So agents, as they're talking about, is when an agent's been built, is an agent perhaps been deployed or built by an external third party, like in the case of Jarek or with Peter Swain. That's what we're talking about here, which is a good examples of people building agents. And then what we do is we utilize, perhaps we actually embed them in our own Claude or whatever, or Anthropic, or we take them to OpenAI. And then what we do is we utilize the agent to run it, fulfill a task, right? So that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about agents and whatever. I believe that he used Hermes, did he? Hermes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, Hermes, because
yeah,
it's a little bit, has less overhead, less bloated than any of the open claw variations. And Hermes apparently, in addition to persistent memory, although it's somewhat limited, it actually learns from the interactions. That's the big piece this about Hermes, is that over the course of time in its interactions with you, it begins to learn and modify its process and its outcome based on its increasing or persistent knowledge and learning of who you are. Whereas I'm told OpenClaw does not have that. So that's the attraction with Hermes. Plus, it's a much lighter, much less expensive, doesn't have all the overhead that OpenClaw has.
right.
That's how it was explained to me.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what we want, right? For it to kind of understand and it augments, as
Well,
opposed to,
that's what a chief of staff is, in
yeah,
essence, right? If it was a human, yeah, they finish your sentences. So that's, I think, the concept that they're trying to building a chief of staff in a product like Hermes, as compared to OpenClaw and some of the other autonomous agents out there,
yeah.
is the reason. But then I think Peter particularly looked at that product.
Absolutely. So yeah, so with so his was very much something like this where he has the sort of this is the platform if you like, and you have some examples of some of the um the agents. Okay. And then these agents, and there's an MCP connector that then these could be the top layer if you see them in that way. And then the layer beneath that would be the one that you get through the MCP, which you use through your Claude or Anthropic or OpenAI, right? So those are just examples of what we can do right in this space, which is
Mm,
which is fantastic. So
awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
awesome.
yeah, so that was one example, and I wanted to show you before yeah, it is. I mean, he's done some really good work in terms of, and I'm still like, and it's just on a note on that because, when we see agents, it's quite, what's the word? It's awe-inspiring, right? Bottom line is we still have to put our work. It's our company. It's our avatar. It's our branding. We need to put it, in there. It's kind of who we're serving, and it's our story, which we reminded of, like in one of our sessions with him in our conversation, which is absolutely the thing. It's the clients we serve, and it's our branding that we then more we can train whichever model we use or agents that it better understand the kind of we inform it and it understands us better, right? So just to kind of so that was one of the things we spoke about, sort of thinking about chat 123 chat AI. And the thing which I would say is what we want to be doing, the essential three things we can start doing is thinking about our own data settings for sure. Because I wanted to flag this up before we finish. Essential three things to explore. Claude .ai, or whether we're using our and I've leaned more towards Claude today. It was one that a lot of the conversations I've had last few days was really with Claude, although we can then of course do the same with OpenAI, right? So, and this is the example of that free chat 123 chat dot AI tokenization in practice, and then thinking about the vulnerabilities. This is the research, which part of some of the training I went on. Two agents at work, one finds vulnerabilities, one looks at adversarial ties to disapprove them. So this is work and it scans. And this is now running in Opus 4.8. We don't see it, but these are actual checks and scanning that's happening behind the scenes.
Mm,
So it's also nice to know, right? Because I actually attended that. I was like, great, like I want to hear what you're doing. This was like a few days ago.
mm,
So recap, the question isn't whether to use AI, it's knowing where the data lives when we're using any AI tool. Agents have these are six components that we talked about today. And the one most builders, developers skip is trust and verification, and remembering the expert in the loop or human in the loop. Agents fail in four predictable ways. Hallucination, it makes things up, it drifts, and there may be a misalignment, so each has a fix. Data exposure happens at three layers: what you type in, the platform, and where your client's data. It's critical. Some of the things, I mean, for us as a coach like myself, we sign, and also Simbo too, right? So we sign agreements with, this is kind of part of our terms and conditions, right? The infrastructure is catching up. So self-hosted sandboxes, MCP tunnels. We've seen an example here that was introduced to us that we spoke about. One thing to try this week to do: pick one layer from today that applies directly to your situation, make one change. If you type sensitive information, business AI, think about the tier you're on, the client data, and also use this free tool, right? From data literacy to skills, the next layer. So for those who are looking to build skills, drop me a quick message. We can jump on a call, and that's three session build together. And our next session, of course, our one-to-one, we can have as a 30-minute call. The next session, of course, is on the 24th. And please, tag a colleague who'd find our sessions useful, these conversations, and leave a short recommendation on LinkedIn. I'd really that help kind of get more presence out there. And the next call, as I mentioned, is on the 24th. I hope you found today helpful. And thank you
Wow.
so very much for all this like conversations and the shares. Appreciate you for being here and
Mm,
being active in this space. Appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, invaluable, Bally. I actually have a webinar that I'm doing in an hour speaking to potential lawyers. So I'm not going to be able to digest all of this, but the use of private small language
Mm,
models and tokenization and just you know it, all that stuff will fly over their heads. But the bottom line is there are better ways than
mm.
using ChatGPT to do legal research
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll share this via email, kind of what we covered and the recording. And, please feel free to reach out. Veruza, I know, thank you for being here. If you found it useful, I know it's like, what, coming up to 8 now in Dubai. Yeah, brilliant having you here. Pleasure. And yeah, there's going to be lots of questions because when we're going through this, I come out of AI sessions, I'm like, oh, what did they say? And then it starts like making sense, right? Hopefully, like that's how why one of the reasons why I started these because I could see that there's a lot, right? And that's why we want to unpick it and then try something for ourselves and have a look at these tools and certainly do the one that the tool by that was introduced to us by John. Okay, well, have a great
Mm.
rest of your week, and I will see you in 2 weeks, and I'll say more about what will happen in July and pleasure. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you. Always pleasure seeing you too.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, everyone. God bless.
Yeah. Take
See
care.
you,
Bless you
see you in
guys.
two
Take
weeks,
care. Bye.
everyone. Bye now. Bye.
Cool. Diddly.
Bye.
Bye.